Well, there are several kinds of talks that one can give, and they follow geometric figures. One can give a circular talk that is like a symphony that starts on a note and it makes a big circle and it comes right back to the same note. Or one can give a spiral talk where you take a theme and you come back to it, and you make another loop and you come back to it, and each time you progress. Or you can make a linear talk. And a linear talk is something like a train ride. It starts in one place and it goes to another. That's what this talk is going to be like. It's going to be a linear talk, only it's going to be like a bullet train. Because I have a lot of information and little time to get through it. So we're going to go very fast, and since it's review of everything that everybody knows about the Rosicrucian teaching anyway, we can go fast. That way it won't be so boring. The title for the talk today is Limitation. In the Rosicrucian philosophy, we're taught to look for the good in everything. We're taught that if we look for the good, and we really do it, we get right down to the divine root of a matter. We're also taught that if we look for the good, that has a potent transforming power. There are people who have deviated from the best that they could do with their archetype, and if we look for the good, we can do a lot to help them to return to the greatest good. However, it's not always an easy matter. Sometimes it's like a child that has been neglected or abused or spoiled, that has grown up to be a nasty teenager. If you look for the good, and if you do it sincerely, and it's genuine, it'll work, but it'll take a long time and a lot of persistence. Over the years, I have come to look for the good in some strange places. I meet very strange people. There are things in life that are normally highly distasteful, and I have found good in some very odd things. And one of them is rumor. I have come to love rumors. If you can separate fact from fantasy, rumor is much more rich in content than fact. When you have fact, you know what happened, and you know exactly what happened. But when you have rumor, you know what happened, plus you know subconsciously what everybody thinks about it. And if you want to read the subconscious atmosphere of society or people around you, you listen to rumors. Even gossip, which is a much sicker kind of thing, has that same ability. You can tell. Yesterday I met a person and we started talking, and immediately the conversation started going to conspiracy talk and gossip about different presidents and things like that, and how they sustained their power over people. Immediately I knew that this was a disempowered person, because people who get involved with conspiracy thought are people that feel they don't have any power themselves, so it must be somebody else that is wielding the power and is doing it in a sneaky fashion. By no means am I trying to say that we should become rumor mongers or that we should become gossips. We should always try to communicate clearly and stick to fact as much as we can. But that doesn't mean that there isn't value in rumor or gossip. In the macrocosm, over a long period of time, there are things that develop that are sort of like social rumor or social gossip. And they include things like folklore and traditions. The Bible, which we're using to get at a sane mind, a soft heart, and a sound body, the Bible is steeped in folklore and tradition. For example, surrounding the Old Testament, there are a lot of apocryphal books. And the apocryphal books, some of them are accepted by some religions, some not by others, and they trail off into very apocryphal works. And then beside that, there's the unofficial Bible. There are the rabbinical tales, which are delightful. There hasn't been a compilation for almost 200 years now, and if any of you ever run into the rabbinical tales, a good copy of it, please let me know, because I'm desirous to get one. They have all kinds of occult matter and all sorts of mysticism in them that are not in the Bible, and it's spoken of directly. In the New Testament, it's also surrounded by a lot of folklore. There are a number of apocryphal gospels, and there are all kinds of other traditions surrounding it. One of the folkloric traditions has to do with the Gospels and the evangelists, where Matthew is always pictured as a human face or a human body. Mark is pictured as a lion or a lion's head. This tradition goes so far that Venice is called the City of Lions, and it's called the City of St. Mark because the famous St. Mark's Cathedral is there. Luke is portrayed by a bull. And John is portrayed as an eagle. I can even, in my neighborhood, there's a little religious supply store where they sell pictures and things like that. You can go in there and they have little charm bracelets with the 4 evangelists on there as baubles. However, if you tell the proprietor of the store that those are the same beings that comprise the Sphinx, or if you tell them that those are the 4 fixed signs of astrology, you'll say, you're a heretic. You've fallen for pagan superstition. But if you tell them it's the 4 beasts of Ezekiel, it's fine. It'll go back to things. Beside the folkloric association with these 4 Gospels, there are a lot of other traditions. There are a lot of other Gospels. Max Heindel, for example, liked to read apocryphal Gospels. For example, the story of Looking for the Good, where he sees the dead dog with the white teeth. You can't find that in the New Testament, in the Bible. You have to look in the Apocrypha to find that. So there are all sorts of traditions, and I find them helpful if I'm trying to collect my thoughts. And when I tried to collect my thoughts to put these talks together, I have relied on all kinds of folklore and tradition about the Bible. In ancient times, before the councils of Nice, the Second Council of Nice was almost exactly at the time that Max Heindel says the age of Pisces began, and the Second Council of Nice declared all of the mystery wisdom of the ancient world heresy. And it just shut everything off. And so that we then officially entered into the age of Pisces, which is the sign of blind faith. You know, like you believe, the less you see, the more you believe kind of consciousness. I don't know what criteria were used at the councils of Nice when they settled on 4 Gospels, but I do like the fact that they did settle on 4 Gospels. The number 4 and the geometrical square that goes with it has always been associated with trial. You see if somebody is square or not. Or the number 4 and the square has often been associated with measurement. We even measure triangles by how much square area there is in it. Or if we get into the integral calculus, any curve of any kind is measured by the number of squares within it. It's like we have a consciousness, or the consciousness of God for test, trial, and measurement is square. Glenn can tell you that you can't build anything and have it stand unless it is square. So the number 4 and the square is the number of building. Even the atoms themselves out of which we build things are made by the right-hand rule, which is the principle of the square. So it is a general principle that works throughout nature. When we look to Rosicrucian cosmology, whether we look in the macrocosm and see the 7 globes and the 7 revolutions, they always occur in 4 realms. So the number 4 comes up again. Or when we go through our cycle of rebirth, we go through 4 realms: concrete thought, desire world, the etheric subdivision, and the chemical subdivision of the physical body. It's always that the constructive building work is done in 4s. So, whether it is associated, whether the 4 Gospels are associated with the 4 fixed signs, or whether they're associated with the 4 mystery schools, there is another tradition about the Gospels that each of the Gospels rules one of our bodies, one of our ways of building and testing and measuring experience. According to this tradition, and it's like gossip, it's like folklore, the physical body and the mineral plane is ruled by Matthew. The etheric body and the vital body is associated with Mark. The desire body is associated with Luke, and the mind is associated with St. John's Gospel. I don't know if this is all completely true. That's one of the things that we're going to dig out and test in these talks to see if it is true, and if so, how it relates to a sound body, a soft heart, and a sane mind. That's what we're trying to get at. That's for the whole 2 weeks we're trying to get at that sort of thing. Yesterday I gave you a very challenging thing to do overnight. I asked everybody to read all of St. Matthew's Gospel end to end. A few people have gotten pretty close. Somebody told me they got all the way up to chapter 16. That is called a macroscopic reading of a gospel. What we're doing with the Bible in these talks, it's not the only way to do it, but what we're doing is all macroscopic views. We're not doing like a parson does, where he takes one sentence or one word and preaches an entire sermon on it. And we're not looking at a single episode, like a little story or a parable. And we're not even looking at the sequence of events in the life of Jesus. We're looking at the whole. We're trying to look at the whole thing all together. We're trying first, today and tomorrow, to look at a sound, dense physical body, as it is called in the Rosicrucian philosophy. And we say that the dense physical body of a human being is a microcosm of the dense physical world at large in the cosmos. It's not, they don't look identical. The dense physical body of God is wherever there is a planet. And we obviously aren't constructed in that same way. But the dense physical body is our relation to the chemical region of the physical world. If we do not have a dense physical body and the experience it gives us in the chemical region, we can't know anything about that plane. It would all be gossip. So we're going to start looking macroscopically at the dense physical body at St. Matthew's Gospel and try to get to a sound body. I lived here for about 3 years in the mid-60s. And when I was here, I had all sorts of little jobs that I did. I was an errand boy, and I was the cashier in the cafeteria, and I was the shipping clerk, and I did most of the bindery work. And in the bindery work, I frequently found myself in the editorial offices. And being snoopy, I call it investigative, I looked at all the books that were there. And one of the most profound-looking books was a big book. It was about, I'd say, at least 14 inches high. And it was thick. And it said, The Alchemical Works of Paracelsus. And I had my first experience of understanding something from alchemy. I threw the book open, and on the first page, Paracelsus says, just like this column alone, he says there are 7 metals. Having taken college chemistry for chemical engineers, I realized something was a little different there. But when I looked at it, the way the typesetting was set, the way the table of the metals was there, was identical in feel to the table on page 29 of the Rosicrucian Cosmoconception. That is the section on the visible and invisible worlds. Max Heindel says there are 7 worlds. And I looked at the table of metals, and I immediately saw the 7 worlds. A few pages on, Paracelsus goes on to give planets for each of the 7 worlds. And so we have 3 columns that tie together in one way. It's not the only way. The planets, the metals that are involved in the transmutation of base metals, that is lead and iron, into gold, into food for God, and the spiritual worlds. This is only 21 entries on the entire chart, but it's filled. There's an enormous amount of information. We're only going to look just for a few seconds at the bottom row, the row that says Saturn, lead, and the physical world. Because that is what we're trying to get at. We're trying to get at the physical world and the dense physical body. So I'll give you a preview of what we're trying to do. We're trying to ask questions. All thinking in the sense of concrete thought is asking questions. We're told in the Rosicrucian Cosmoconception that all concrete thoughts are vacuums, that matter forms itself around a vacuum. The psychological posture of a vacuum is questioning. When we ask a question, we're making a form for the answer to be poured in from the spiritual worlds. So what I usually try to do when I'm putting a talk together is I try to ask definite questions and then set out to see if there is something that will fill those questions with an answer. The first question is, because we're exploring here. First question is it true or reasonable that Saturn rules the physical plane and the mineral kingdom? And if so, in what manner? Is it true or reasonable that Saturn rules the dense body in general? And if so, in what manner? Is it true or reasonable that the character of St. Matthew's Gospel is Saturnian? And if so, in what manner? If we can tie all of those things together, we should have a way of relating to our physical body by the Rosicrucian philosophy and St. Matthew's Gospel. Obviously, we could spend an enormous amount of time on all of this, and we only have 40 minutes, maybe 40-some odd minutes, so we're going to have to go very, very fast. In terms of our experience in our evolutionary creation, the solar system in which we belong to, the dense physical plane is the end of the line. It's where the bus turns around and goes back home. The dense physical plane, as far as our evolution is concerned, is as dense and as concentrated as it gets. Now, dense and concentration happen to be prime keywords for Saturn. So I think we're going in the right direction. As the end of the line, Saturn, or the dense physical plane, represents the limits. You may say that the density of this stuff is as dense as God can hold matter in concentration. This is the limit of manifestation. This is how deep God can concentrate. That's quite a concentration, to be able to hold this cosmos in manifestation for all the many millions of years that it is in manifestation. That's a powerful concentration. That's very deep. Deep depth is another Saturnine word. Our consciousness here, especially since the fall, is heavy. It's leaden, which is of a Saturnine character. If we want to look to astrology, or if we want to look to the mysteries, almost every spiritual astrologer and every mystery school that I've ever encountered has said that the mineral kingdom is ruled by Saturn. If we look in Rosicrucian cosmology, the mineral stage is the first stage of any life wave. And any recapitulation that is involved with Saturn is mineral-like. Something the physical body, the dense physical body, was begun in the Saturn period. And every Saturn revolution, every Saturn globe, there has been an improvement on it. So we see that we're on to the right kind of thing, I think. The Rosicrucian cosmos conception goes further and says that the consciousness that we have in the physical body is leaden. It's trance-like, especially when we were minerals. So I think it's safe to say that the first question is reasonably answered, that Saturn does seem to rule the dense physical body and the mineral kingdom. But we haven't said in what manner, but we'll look at all the in what manners later. So Saturn is at least the primary ruler of the physical body. In our human life cycle, the dense body, as we have said, represents the end of the line. It is as far outward as we can go. Even the outwardmost part of our body, the skin, which has all the silicates in it, is ruled by Saturn. So that seems to relate. Saturn also rules the inmost part of our body. That is the bones, the skeleton, the stony mineral stuff that exists after everything else has passed away, sometimes for thousands, in some cases millions of years. So it looks pretty clear that Saturn, our body, is basically water with minerals in solution. Some of them in matrices that are etheric matrices that are associated with organic chemistry. But basically, our body is a formation of minerals suspended in water, all of which is suspended in ether. So by reason and a little bit of study, and it's up to you to determine, by intuition, it does look like Saturn rules the physical body also. Now, when we get to whether Saturn, I'm sorry, I'm rubbing my forehead. I got a terrible sunburn, and it's getting to the point where it's starting to itch. What? Yeah. When we come to trying to determine whether Saturn rules St. Matthew's Gospel, we have something more difficult to do. When we look at Matthew's Gospel macroscopically, that is in one reading straight through without stopping, one gets the flavor of it. The whole overall flavor. And some people, I was writing postcards to friends back home this morning, and some people actually got the flavor and actually predicted words that I'm going to use in the talk. And I felt it was really a success. We've got an intuitive lot of people here. It's not easy, because if you look at the differences between the four Gospels, it's a very subtle difference between the four Gospels. It's not like where I live. The four seasons are obvious. You know, when it gets to 20 below zero and then 80s or 90s in the summer, there's a big difference between the four seasons. It's sort of like being out on the Sonora Desert. On the Sonora Desert, to be able to tell the difference between the seasons, you have to be very, very subtle. And that's what the Gospels are like. So let's look at Saturn in a slightly different way and see how it applies to the Gospels. But now I'm lost in my notes already. So much for a sane mind. A few minutes ago, we said that Saturn ruled the first or Saturn period of evolution. We could expand that and say that all definite initial beginnings, all mineral-like stages, or the ground floor of everything, is ruled by Saturn. We've also said that Saturn rules the mineral skeleton, which endures long after death. If we put those two statements together, the beginning and the endurance, we see another side of Saturn. Saturn rules time. Saturn, in this sense, is the divine chronometer, the timekeeper. Saturn is described as having a sickle that says when the time is there to end, and Saturn carries the hourglass, saying the time has run out. If we look at the four Gospels, it becomes very clear that the Gospel of Matthew is the Gospel that is most occupied with time. As we noted yesterday, it begins with the generation of Jesus Christ. And it begins with a lineage. And it isn't merely a genetic lineage, it is a cultural lineage. For example, it tells such and such happened up to the exile at Babylon. So it is very clearly associated with genetic and cultural history. Moreover, if we look at Matthew's gospel relative to all of the others, it's the most episodic. It's almost as if it's a timetable. That if you read Matthew's gospel, it says, and then he did this, and then he did that. There are episodes in the other gospels, but it isn't in that timetable format. In the course of time, history and tradition develop. And no people in the ancient world were more historical or more traditional than the ancient Jews. In fact, that's one of the best records that we have going far, far back into history, the Sabbath. Saturday, the ancient Jews did their worshiping on Saturn's day. That was their day, and it still is their day. And no gospel is more cognizant of that than Matthew. Also, Matthew's gospel frames the entire life of Jesus in prophecies. There are at least a dozen that Matthew notes. There are approximately a half a dozen that Christ states, and then there are a few little vague allusions. If you look at all of the other gospels, like John, I think there may be one prophetic allusion in John's gospel. In fact, as you go up from Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, the number of prophecies that are fulfilled or that are even mentioned, they diminish all along. So Matthew's gospel is very much a Saturnian gospel in that sense. Even the things that have to do with the spiritual worlds happen in dreams. They don't happen in direct spiritual visions because people are earthbound and Saturnine locked into the material world, that the experience of the inner world has to take place in dreams. Max Heindel used to love to say it almost, the mills of God grind slowly, but they grind exceedingly fine. When he was speaking about destiny, the very spirit of which is Saturnian. And that is the spirit of St. Matthew's gospel. It's a hard gospel. It's a very hard gospel. Some of the things are mentioned in other places, but when there are statements like, if thine eye offend thee, pluck it out. Or he talks about, when other people talk about the joyous period of the second coming, he's talking about weepings and gnashings of teeth. It's a tough gospel. And it's so strict that even the thought of adultery is, you're like you're out the door right there. Man, I don't stand a chance if it's all Matthew's gospel. Then there's that entire chapter. The entire chapter that's filled with hard sayings as a rebuke of the Pharisees. There are rebukes of the Pharisees in all four Gospels. That was part of the tension of the Gospels. That's the internal structure. But an entire chapter, he just drums it down hard, hard, hard. St. Matthew's Gospel is also Saturnian in another way. It's like the 10th house. It's exclusive. It is the formula, by its own words, it is the formula for the Christian mystic initiation for Jewish Christians. Literally, in St. Matthew's Gospel, when Christ Jesus commands the disciples to share his teachings and to bring people into them, he's clear that it should not be shared with the Gentiles, and not even with the Samaritans. It is an exclusive gospel. And this is probably why it's set in the prophecies. Because if you're coming from a Jewish point of view and you are trying to see this as an extension of your spiritual life, it goes right along with the entire Jewish tradition. So Saturn, the Saturnian quality of Matthew's gospel is exacting. It's limiting. It's hard like the physical body. And it seems to be a good place to look for a sound physical body. Now, obviously, we can't talk totally about a sound physical body. That would be a whole series of talks in itself. So we're just going to talk about a few very little things that are important to using and developing a sound physical body. He's going to be giving some talks that are going to be talking about the physical body. Yes, Richard Johnson, is it? David Johnson is going to be giving some other talks on developing a sound physical body. All right, we have pretty much answered the first phrase of all three questions, but we haven't answered that in what manner phrase. So we have to do that for all of them. The title of this talk, as we said earlier, is limitation. And limitation is one of those words and one of those concepts that everybody seems to dislike. Just like the New York Knicks. I dislike the New York Knicks. They got a bunch of thugs on their team. They have one redeeming man, though. They have one man who is very deeply Christian, and it isn't in a phony way. And he happens to be about their best player. His name is Allen Houston. And anytime he's in an interview, he can direct. When they try to say, hey, you were really hot tonight making great shots, he always directs the thought that in a way he says, but it's all for the glory of God. The glory belongs to God and not to me. And he's really genuine in it. He's a beautiful, very beautiful man. All right. The reason that we find limitation such a hard concept is because we live Saturn the wrong way. We live selfishly. And then when we see limits, we take them personally. And we try to negate them. And we hate limits. Actually, this is sounds like 1984 doublespeak, but actually, limitation is good for us. When we think of limitation, we think of obstruction. The chemical region of the physical plane is filled with impenetrable obstructions. When we look at somebody, or when we look at some object, we can only see one side of the object. In fact, we only see the outside. We don't see the inner meaning, and we don't see the inner life. Yes, we can get lost in materialism, and we can turn it all into an idolatry. But there are some very good things about the limitations of matter and the material world. As a ground floor, it's the best place for beginners who are wakening up to spiritual awareness. And here is where we wake up. We're tyros. It's good that we learn only one thing at a time. The experience that Saturn gives us through our dense physical bodies of the dense material world is very exacting. And it's very objective. There is no way you can get around it. That is the lesson of Saturn, and that is the lesson of the physical body. What the body needs, it needs. You can't give it any substitutes. You have to give the body exactly what it needs. If you don't, you have aches and pains. You probably have aches and pains anyway. But if we want to have a sound physical body, we have to know what our body needs. So it happens that each of us is a universe, and the biggest law that I have found for giving the body what it needs is that it has nothing to do with dietetics. It does roughly, very, very roughly. Everything is individual. What one person's needs are different than what another person's needs are. And we have to be extremely careful, extremely exacting to find out what our body needs. Then we always give a little more, of course. But that's the way it goes. The physical world is for us to wake up. Now this is shameful for somebody who's trying to give a talk that people are trying to learn something from. But do you know that twice in my life I've walked into lamp poles? I remember it. I know that the physical world is here, and I know that I'm in the physical world. I know what it means to wake up. So we have this stern tone that is in St. Matthew's Gospel, a Saturnian discipline, which is exactly what the physical body requires. If we don't take care of our physical body, it gets flaccid. It gets flabby. And that means that we have lost the Saturnian edge. If we get out of shape, if we get saggy, it means that we have lost control. And this happens. As you get older, you get more relaxed. And as you get more relaxed, then you don't keep that hard edge. And when you lose that hard edge, your body starts changing shape. But if we want to keep keenly aware of ourselves in the physical world through our physical body, we have to keep that edge all the time. For me, the ideal is Mohan Gandhi. If you look at pictures of him, he didn't do a whole lot of physical exercises or things like that. He did some, and he did a lot of walking. But you look at him, even right up to his death, he had a lean, keen, aware physical body. We don't need to be Saturnine worriers, but we do have to be sagacious. We do have to maintain vigilance. We have to keep alert, or else it'll come as a thief in the night, and we'll be whisked away from having a body that's of any use to us. Now, at this point, we have to correct our course. All of this was fine to get to some bits of information about a sound body, but we have to change course, because if we don't, we're going to be producing an illusion and an error about the nature of the chemical region of the physical plane and of the dense physical body. We are looking at that region, or we have been looking at that region, as if it were all solids, opaque, dense, and resistant. But the liquids and the gases also belong to that region, and they are, relatively speaking, they're pretty rare. They're transparent and they're resistless. And that's part of the physical world also. So we have perhaps a beginner's view of the physical world as far as we've gone. For example, in the next revolution, when we get to globe D, in the fifth revolution, the Earth will be no more dense than the liquids. And we'll have to maintain not hard bodies to deal with hard conditions, but we'll have to have bodies that, under more fluidic conditions, we can still maintain the same integrity and the same kind of ability to discern and discriminate where physical differences occur. So what we've looked at so far is helpful for looking at a sound body in some ways, but we're going to have to look in some other ways. To do that, let's look at another Saturnine keyword or Saturnian keyword, and a word that is a key characteristic. Max Heindel, when he talks about entering the desire world, says that one cannot enter the desire world without courage. We mentioned yesterday that if we do not have courage and we enter into the desire world, there are entities that will challenge us and that will frighten us off and will be absolutely worthless. We could even get in worse trouble than that. In my own personal opinion, I don't know whether it's true or not, I believe that the courage comes by love. If we take the example of Max Heindel, the first time he was able to overcome the timidity about entering into the desire world and really leave his body and go off somewhere, it was when somebody he loved was in trouble. And being in trouble, he said, I got to help this person. Out of his love for his friend, he was able to leave his body. But at any rate, courage is the quality. It's not surprising. If we look at the Paracelsus chart, if we put a keyword for the desire world and Mars, courage would work in there really well. So if that is one of the keywords, pass on that. I don't know. Oh, by the way, next Friday, not this Friday, but next Friday, the talk is going to be very short, and I'll entertain all kinds of questions on the talks or on anything. We'll just have some fun. It'll be the part one of Until It Night. We could take words like limitation or resistance or obstruction or imperfection. Those are all words that apply to the physical world. But they have their merit, but they don't seem to be quite the right thing. They are important characteristics because we learn about perfection from imperfection. Ever since the time of the Pythagoreans, we know that what the ear hears, the physical ear hears, is not what the mind hears, that the pitches, that the mathematical perfection of pitch that the mind hears is not what we hear physically. And all instruments, in order to be pleasing to us, have to be detuned from the perfect mathematical pitches. So there are lots of things that we learn from limitations and imperfections and things of that order. All of these words, though, have a little bit of negativity. Even if we took the word patience, it's not quite the right word. When I think about Saturn and the material world and the dense physical body, the key word that strikes me as most suited is faithful. Our purpose here is to gain experience, and unless we take a faithful representation of the external world back within our spiritual being, we are not serving God. And unless we are faithful in the intuitive spiritual impulses that are given to us for moral improvement, unless we carry them out faithfully to the last detail, we are not in the material world in a correct way. Everything that we do must be objectively faithful. This faithfulness has something like the harsh Saturnian discipline, but it is not harsh. It is something that we carry in us. And this faithfulness is something that for us involves great freedom, because we have the most slip, we have the most tolerance to be unfaithful. If we look at Saturn's hourglass, as we have it here, we have the phenomenal realms and we have the transcendental realms. We have the spiritual realms and the material realms. I have only pictured the divine spirit, the life spirit, in the region of abstract thought, or the region of the human spirit. And in the phenomenal realms, the region of concrete thought, the region of the desire world, the region of, and then the physical world with the etheric and chemical subdivisions. Now, in each of these realms, a different kingdom has its primary service. In the chemical region of the physical plane, the minerals provide form. That is their service to the cosmos. Without the minerals, everything would puddle away. It is their Saturnine resistance that allows us to have stability of form. The plants, the service of the plants is to give us vitality. They can take the vitality straight from the sunlight and they can put it into an etheric body, into a matrix that we can consume and sustain our, at least the biological ethers of our etheric bodies. We have given up that ability. We get some sunshine, vitamin D, but for the most part, all animals and all plants, in order to have the desire function, have sacrificed the ability to take life in. Animals give desires. Each animal, each species, each family of animals represents a character, a moral character. The zodiac is called the circle of animals because each of the animals embodies a very complicated idea that is a desire feeling. We as humans, our service to the cosmos is to think. We give concrete thoughts, and we give concrete thoughts in a very unusual way because we are the only ones in the phenomenal worlds that can look into any of the phenomenal worlds and have waking consciousness and can think about things. So anytime we think about something, even saying that a cloud looks like a dolphin, we have objectified something in our thought, and that is a service to God. In the region of abstract thought, Jehovah and the angels are important in developing and guiding the ideas. The archangels and Christ do developing and guiding from the life spirit, and the powers, the chief of which is the Father, does something there. I don't want to get, I'm trying to see how much I can cut back and hold back because we have 5 minutes, maybe 10 at the most, and I'm trying to get to a principle. We're right in the middle. And in the middle, we have the most slip. The gods that are in the transcendental worlds, that have their main focus and awakeness there, are so perfect in their consciousness that we call them laws of nature. They are attuned to the truth so much that they are perfectly consistent. They are obedient to the truth because they love the truth. You read somebody like Emanuel Swedenborg or somebody like that who saw and wrote all those things down. It's just a glorious thing to see. He said how this realm of gods obeys the one and such. When we look the other direction, there are three worlds above us, 3 below us. The further we get away from the middle of the chart, the more obedience there is in a creaturely way. Animals, and some of them are individuated, especially pets that have been taken away from the group spirit. There's some individuality, you see quite a bit there. But with plants, you look at a field of goldenrod, all under the same conditions, you'll see that they don't all quite grow to the same height. And they all don't have the same spacings between their leaves. But for the most part, they're much more regular. But when you get to the mineral kingdom is as dumb as it gets. given the same, it's good. You need the fundamental experience. Given the same conditions, water will always boil at the same temperature with the same air pressure. And so the quality, when you get to the mineral kingdom and the physical body, is that there is a greater obedient faithfulness, whereas in the other direction there is a greater voluntary faithfulness. So what we're trying to say is that our relationship to the minerals requires that same kind of obedience, but voluntarily. We have so much freedom that we can even sin, and we prove our freedom by sinning. We go against the laws of everything. So the question is, how, in what manner does faithfulness or this obedience work in our physical bodies? That's an extremely important question. In human physiology, the way the body runs, the faithfulness that tries to keep the body sound as one thing is called homeostasis. By the principle of homeostasis, the body tries to remain static. It's a marvel. Since I've retired, I've started to do something I promised myself that I would always do. I'm studying physiology. Max Heindel told us that if we want to become healers, we ought to study physiology. And it's phenomenal. Do you know that for things to get from food into the cells, that there are homeostatic reactions that involve enzymes, that some of them occur tens of thousands of times per second. There's always a balance. This is where we have Saturn exalted in Libra. It's right at the fulcrum of the balance. The body always wants to stay steady. It's the way of saying that the spirit, as manifest in the physical body, keeps the physical body sound by trying to have the same unity that the spirit has as its unity. So there are hundreds. I'm writing them down. I'm going through a physiology book, and as I see a new homeostasis, I write it down. Just to list some of them, there's the sugar insulin. If you get too much sugar, you produce one kind of condition in your body. If you get too much insulin, you get another condition. There's a sodium-potassium balance. There's just a list, hundreds of different kinds of balances, all that try to maintain a homeostasis. So whenever the temperature occurs, a change in temperature occurs, or a change in air pressure, or we have pressures from blows, or we have mental stress, or if we get into an atmosphere where the oxygen level changes, the body has all of these regulatory things to bring it back to the static conditions. This indicates a very important thing as far as the maintenance of the physical body. Moderation. If we go out and eat a quarter pound of chocolate, which I have done actually. I met a man 3 weeks ago, and this man ate half a gallon of Breyer's chocolate ice cream every day, and that was his diet. I couldn't believe it. I live mostly on ether. I live mostly on vegetable juices. But moderation. If we are at the Saturnine center, if we're exactly at the center of the fulcrum, if you stand on a teeter-totter, the closer you get to the center, it takes just a little bit of movement, and you can cause great change. You don't have to go to great extremes. The more that we have moderation, which is an excellent Saturn word, the more we have moderation in our bodies, the more likely we are to have good health. The more we deviate and the more we cause the body to upset the homeostatic balances, the more we wear the body down. And Saturn eventually gets us. You know, we age and we weaken, we tire, and we can tire out almost any system in our body by abuse. We have to act to serve. We have to act to experience. We have to change to evolve. But every time we act, every time we change, every activity we do breaks up homeostasis. And the body has to work to regulate. So if we can do everything with an ease so that we accomplish the greatest amount with the least amount of huffing and puffing, with the least amount of the destruction of the homeostatic balances, so that our bodies can be faithful to maintaining a unity that is like the unity of the Spirit, the more likely we are to have good health. We can do all of the things that we do, we can do them efficiently if we apply limitation and if we apply it faithfully in full freedom. Tomorrow we'll continue with Matthew's Gospel and a sound physical body, and we're going to close now with the Rosicrucian prayer, but I'm going to be real finicky. This is a Saturn day, so I can be finicky. Grammatically, when we say the Rosicrucian prayer in plural, meditation should not be pluralized. When we say, when the words of our mouths and the meditation of our hearts, the meditation should not be pluralized because we're all in one thing together. And grammatically, it is correct to say that the words of my mouth, of our mouths, and the meditation of our hearts. All right, I'm being a strict Saturnine person, but see, at least today you don't have to read an entire gospel. And those of you who didn't read it, you can read it tonight. O God, increase our love for Thee, so that we may serve Thee better from day to day. Let the words of our mouths and the meditation of our hearts be acceptable in Thy sight, O Lord, our strength and our Redeemer. Yeah, thank you. It was really nice. Thank you, Richard. Yeah.
Can you tell me what those other symbols are? I don't know what they are.
Oh, there's sun, moon,
Sun,
Mercury,
moon, Mercury,
Venus, Jupiter,
Jupiter. I got the other two.
Mars, and Saturn. Yeah.
Thank you.